we, the foundations, as leading social institutions, believe that an urgent, inclusive, citizen-led national intervention is required to restore the legitimacy, credibility, and enhancement of the South African democratic project. It is time for every South African to take part in paving a new way forward. We call on all citizens to engage in defining a clear vision and to establish a unifying program that inspires new national hope. Out of this reflection must arise a renewed commitment to constitutional democracy and the urgency to improve the material conditions of those who are left behind.
Oh, for more on this, our SABC News reporter Kani Mapanga attended, of course, that briefing, and she joins us live. A very good afternoon, Kani. Tell us what's happening where you are.
Indeed, Nompu, good afternoon to you and to the viewers at home. 30 years into democracy, and certainly in these uncertain times that we're currently facing in the country, the foundations that are prominently in the names of eminent South Africans whose significant contribution to the constitutional democratic order does not need to be noted here, have gathered to call for this national dialogue to address a number of concerns as we've seen them culminate in South Africa's democratic order 30 years into democracy. In contrast to the visions and ideals we've seen some of these late South Africans fighting for. In the interest of time, Nompu, I am going to quickly bring in the executive trustee of the Steve Biko Foundation, Mr. Nkosinathi Biko, with us today. Thank you so much for your time. We are looking at a strange changing political landscape in the country, but more so, this dialogue seems not only to address the uncertainty, but what we've seen culminate over time, over the 30 years in the current state that we see South Africa in. What do you hope that this dialogue will achieve for South Africans who seem, following the 2024 national and provincial elections, rather to be despondent with respect to this constitutional democracy that your father as well also played a significant role towards?
Thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon to you and your listeners. Indeed, there is a sense that our people are disheartened. And an election is a dipstick. It gives you a sense of the temperature at which a nation is operating. And ours is indeed less than optimal. There is an expression in isiXhosa that says, "Umuntu akalahlwa." There is no dustbin for a human being. And if there is no such dustbin for a single human being, there can never be one for 64 million human beings. We cannot give up on ourselves. So what the foundations have done is together and to agree on energizing our citizens from the ground upward, organizing them into a national conversation that can help us give guidance to how we want to be led over the next short while.
Apologies for that. Now, this happens at an opportune time. We know that the president is yet to announce the 7th administration. We are heading in towards power sharing. We've seen the foundations express concern about the agenda for the next 5 years not being tabled, but rather seemingly the delay being behind who will get what and whose 60% is it anyway in this new 7th administration.
Yes. And those are exactly the questions that we are going to deal with starting next Tuesday going forward. And I can tell you from the perspective of the Steve Biko Foundation, it is of great concern that all of these discussions that are happening up to now are around power. There is no message that has landed yet, in our view, that there is concern about things beyond power. And we know what power play has done. It is precisely what has resulted in us being where we are today, where 54% of our people are living beneath the breadline, and we are the most unequal society in the world, and we seem to be pulling apart at the seams in respect of race, and ethnicity dynamics. We cannot give up on ourselves. So we are determined to get communities together to embark on this national dialogue, and indeed to give, if they elect one, to give any government, whether it's a coalition or a government of national unity, the agenda that they ought to have in their hands.
And if you look at what the national dialogue intends to contribute towards this democratic order beyond the talk shop, as some have been stating earlier today, what exactly are we looking at as South Africans? Because I'm sure 30 years into democracy and dealing with a number of these issues or different challenges plaguing the country, I think South Africans are tired of discussing things. They now want to see action. And I think the electorate made that clear in the 2024 national provincial elections.
Yeah. By our very definition, we are a people that must talk. Our, at least the majority of our cultures are about building consensus through conversation, right? So we can't have a path behind or beyond the issue of talking. The end goal of this, though, is that we will come up with a compact that not only is between us as citizens, but is one that is going to govern our relationship with our governors, our legislators, the business community itself, because they are an important part of this, right? What do we do about such a stubborn economy in respect of transformation when we committed in 1994 to an inclusive economy? And I suspect that if we don't do that, what tends to happen to human beings once they lose the ability to talk is that then their hands start talking for them. And you end up having conflicts such as we see in many places around the world on matters that we can lead.
And I have to ask, Mr. Biko, you are seeing that, you have said rather that the GNU discussion or having a point on that issue right now is premature. But I think as the Steve Biko Foundation and as the son of Steve Biko, and you can reflect on his legacy, if you're looking at the way in which the talks are taking place, we're seeing the ANC and the DA having to have those discussions, and some feeling that these parties are ideologically different and should not have been together in the formation of this new 7th administration. When you reflect on the work of the late Steve Biko, you reflect on black consciousness and you see the discussions taking place and the criticisms towards the governing party, how do you sound off on that?
So from the lens of black consciousness, there is something unnerving about what seems to be a residue of the past in these conversations. Seeming presumptions of superiority, elements of seeming inferiority that are at play here, right? We have returned with a vote that has given no party the ultimate majority. And we have a responsibility to form a government as the people of South Africa. The ANC has got 3 paths to a government. Whatever they name it, 3 paths. It has a path through the EFF and smaller parties, which will give us a 50+1 or thereabout. It has a path through an MK. There are no ideological differences between most of these parties, by the way. I do think that we should do a deep dive into that matter. All of them have already been in bed in the past in coalitions of some form or the other. So it has a path to the MK, and that path can play through various combinations, including participation of them in the alliance, which is already provided the ANC with the infrastructure to manage their differences, for instance, between it and COSATU and it and the South African Communist Party, which can result in an election. It has a third part, which is a combination of both of them, which gives it the kind of power that we don't want to see as demonstrated by the last elections. And then, of course, it has a path through the DA. And this is where we need to find a balance between the kinds of sentiment that we are bringing to the table. None of these parties, the DA's only path to power, as far as we are concerned, as the Steve Biko Foundation, seems to be through the ANC. That alone should settle the nature of conversations at the table, and at least the kinds of boisterousness that we bring to the table.
So the fears and sentiments on the ground, according to the foundation, are not without reason.
Well, I mean, it is concerning that we are seemingly nowhere on this matter. And it's also certainly concerning for me to see how people have abandoned commitments that they had made to the electorate. Yes. So if you go, for instance, to the pact that was formed by the DA, its primary goal was to remove the ANC. Yes. Secondary goal was to keep EFF out of power, right? And of course, to hold the ANC accountable. And if you look at some of the things that have played out at the table, right, to abandon the mandate that they have as an opposition party and go into a coalition departs from its first goal, because they will now reinforce the ANC. The second part of it, of course, of holding the ANC accountable, seems to be off the table. There will be no prosecutions on this matter and that matter as part of the deal. Now, I'm saying that when you look at that as a voter, having voted on the basis of a particular promise, it explains why all voters across are quite upset about the kinds of horse trading that we are seeing here, because none of it seems to be based on the issues of principle or the people's agenda. It's about securing power. Now, what was one of the major contestations between the ANC and the DA? It was the issue of cadre deployment. What are the parties doing now as they sit? They are drawing up lists for cadre deployment, right? And that is the view of the Steve Biko Foundation. We really need a conversation that can take the agenda and the issues of South Africa beyond just the political gains and agenda that we are seeing playing out before us.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Biko. They're reflecting quite critically on the uncertain times that we are facing as a country, saying that the time is now for the greater agenda to be placed on the table, and that is something that the National Dialogue expects to achieve. It is in the starting stages. It remains to be seen how it manifests in South Africa's constitutional democratic order and what it achieves towards creating the South Africa, quote unquote, that is imagined by the electorate. Of course, he's expressing concern there as we witness a changing political landscape, and we see the formation of the GNU, or we await rather the president's announcement on what the 7th administration will look like. That the conversation over the coming days, or the past days that we've seen since the inauguration of the president, has been centered around leadership positions and what each political party rather will get from these negotiations, and not rather what the South Africans will gain from this next 7th administration. Of course, we'll be monitoring these national dialogue talks as they start to make way across the length and breadth of the country, and what it achieves in coming up with a new South Africa, or rather an idea or vision of a South Africa imagined in line with those eminent South Africans who fought quite hard for the constitutional democratic order that a number of South Africans enjoy today. Over to you, Nompu.
Thanks very much. Very interesting discussion there that you had with Mr. Biko, my colleague there, Nkosinathi Biko.